Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. How has COVID changed your politics in terms of left and right? Now, I think there's two really nice examples that both affect the left and the right in terms of how COVID and COVID collective hysteria and the reactions from the world, bottom up, and from governments top down, may have changed your viewpoint on certain things. And they should potentially have changed your viewpoint on loads and loads of things. But there's a couple nice examples, and one of them for each side. And I think it also helps drive home why many of us who call ourselves classical liberals or libertarians are what we are. Why do we hold this? It's not just, hey, freedom is good, or hey, we believe in freedom, or hey, you have no right to tread on our rights and things, which is of course key to it. But it also concerns the dangers of centralization and the benefits, the ingenious benefits over the long run of decentralization. Decentralization is what gives us, the brilliance of natural selection. It's decentralized design by virtue of this decentralized network of animals eating one another over time creates the most brilliant design in the universe. Cultural selection is the decentralized nature of just people and companies and all of the stuff happening, and over time we end up designing things for our brains like writing and speech and music, and all of the things around us are the products of cultural selection, not by virtue of centralized designers in either case. So once you have that kind of viewpoint that decentralization is everything, which is also part of the romance of blockchain, by the way, and things like this, well, then here's one viewpoint for those who are on the right. Prior to COVID, maybe you were pro-capital punishment. You thought that it's okay for the state to be executing criminals who are guilty of murder or various certain kinds of murder. Now, many of us may or may not have problems per se, and some really bad guy or gal who's done some really bad stuff being killed. You might disagree, you might agree that on retribution, on your viewpoints on that, but you still could agree, like I have always, that I don't want the government involved in actually putting people to death. And my reasons were always because I don't trust the centralized government. Centralized governments can be rife with aiming to go after the political enemies, and it can often happen through sweeps through culture. Suddenly, there's just sort of a groupthink where certain kinds of targets are more likely to be attacked. And if you've been watching what happened, if you're on the right and you've been watching what happened over the last 2 years, just a year ago, even 6 months ago, and still in certain parts of the world, the unvaccinated it was okay to be prejudiced against them. It was okay to fire them. It was okay to not invite them. It was okay to literally prevent them from leaving their homes and participating in society. And everybody, much of the population, felt okay with it. When you're in a world where these sorts of collective hysterias can sweep through and prejudice against out groups, and then the government then either prevents anybody from arguing against it, encouraging censorship of people who argue against it, or potentially puts in laws that require these kinds of prejudice interventions. Well, do you want that same kind of government that can do that to be making life and death decisions? I certainly don't, and I never did. So I think a lot of folks that were on the right might now be saying, okay, I no longer am pro-capital punishment for these reasons. And on the left, a lot of folks who are, team reality are folks that have been on the left historically. There's a bunch of reasons why they feel like they're no longer on the left, but one key example would be the Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Now, as a libertarian, I've always been, well, look, you don't want the power to be in any centralized place like the government. You don't want them to be the only ones that have force of arms for all the same reasons that centralization is dangerous and decentralized things typically are helpful. So if you've been watching, when you see hatreds like this against certain kinds of outgroups sweep through, boom, very quickly and dangerously, well, now you should have an impression, as we've talked about before, what it's like to be an outgroup, or you've at least seen, even if you were vaccinated, the way the unvaccinated were treated as evil outgroups. And in fact, team reality, we were treated as unclean deniers, whether or not we were unvaccinated. These kinds of things, when they sweep through, should give you an impression about Jesus. Look what can happen if there's nothing pushing back, and it's just the only people with guns, the only people with power is the government, which is also swept up in collective hysteria, and then on the backs of the populace going after that outgroup, Well, there's no way for that outgroup to defend themselves legally. They can't defend themselves because the judges and the legal and Congress, they're all whipped up in frenzy as well. No one's coming to their defense. No one. If they're going to come to their defense at the last straw, they need to have force of arms to be able to put up a defense. So whether you're left or you're right, I'm hoping that COVID and the hysteria that happened and the damaging draconian interventions has changed your viewpoint and brought you more solidly into the liberty decentralization position rather than where our opponents are now, which is the authoritarian centralization position in that two-dimensional space that we've talked about many times before. And that was your science moment.